Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey guys, back again with the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute, and nice enough outside to actually get to record on the porch again. So, which I'm happy about. But anyways, rapid fire questions again here today. So today, the first one up is from Doug Frey, who says, Alan, I've really started to like the taste of rye whiskey and want to make one. If I do a mash bill of 49% corn, 51% unmalted rye due to the price of malted rye, is the correct method as follows. Boil mash water, add corn, add high temp amylase, cool to 175, add rye, add beta amylase. Since I'm not adding any malted grain, will there be enough amylase to turn the starches to sugar? I've learned so much from watching your podcast and hopefully look forward to meeting you in June at Spring Mill fundraising event. Thanks. Great question. So you mostly have this correct, and you're using exogenous enzymes. So truthfully, as long as you're using those exogenous enzymes as directed, you're going to have more than enough amylase there. Check your temperature on your enzymes though, and make sure that beta amylase or glucoamylase, if you're using that, what temperature that goes in at, because some of them are at 145 like malt, some of them are at yeast pitch temperatures. It just depends on the brand, where it came from, etc., and the recommendations that they give. But those are going to make up for any lack of malt that you have. Now, if you wanted to do this the old-fashioned way, what you would do would be something more along the lines of, say, 49% corn, and then let's split your rye between rye malt and unmalted rye. So let's call it 25% rye malt, which is actually pretty high. If you wanted to, you could actually drop it down to, you'd probably be pretty efficient around 20% rye malt. So 49 corn, 20 rye malt, what would that be? 31% unmalted rye. Procedure would be to take your water to at least 190 or up to a boil, add your corn, or I like to add water to corn in a wooden barrel is what I like to do. Mix that in good with a handful of that malted rye as well, or preferably malted barley malt, distiller's malt if you can, for the alpha amylase, so that things don't stick together there on the high end, and then let that set for about 45 minutes to 1 hour to begin the process there. Drop down to 170. That's the traditional temperature that most rye was added in a bourbon mash bill, was 170. Mix that in. You might even have to add another handful of malt in there in order just to keep that thinned out, because it is going to want to thicken up on you quite a bit. And then drop down to around 145, 150, and add your rye malt and hold that for 15 to 20 minutes before then dropping to 90 and pitching your yeast. So that would be a more traditional way of doing it, but since you're using exogenous enzymes, you're not going to really have to worry about that. You have no reason to really have to worry about whether or not you have enough enzymes there without the malted rye. And I know malted rye is expensive, but I'll tell you, if you ever play with malted rye, and you play with it in higher percentages, in particular, even do 100% malted rye, man, the flavors that come off of that stuff are beautiful. I love malted rye. It's got a lot of peach and apricot flavor. It's like when you bite into a peach, it's the area in between the skin, the fuzz on the skin, and the actual flesh itself. A lot of that comes through on malted rye, to the extent that really, if you blind tasted a malted rye, a lot of times people would have a hard time determining that that's not a peach brandy of some sort that's had some flavoring added to it. It literally can be that intense on the flavor profile side of things. So bear that in mind. Even though it's expensive, it might be worth it to play around with that product. I love that profile. I'm not big on unmalted rye, but the malted rye I absolutely love. So hopefully that answered your question. We'll move on to the next one here and see what else we've got. Let's see. So this one is from Bob in Costa Rica, my good buddy Bob. Hey man, I hope you're doing well, buddy. So hey Alan, I've watched almost all your videos, many more than 2 times, and each time I learn new things. They're very concentrated, and I almost always pick up new gems, viewing them more than once. My question is about esters. You mention them often, as do many other presenters in forums and publications. Firstly, are there undesirable esters? Secondly, do esters come through in all phases of a distillation? Lastly, are significant esters lost by not distilling very soon after fermentation is completed? Thank you as always. Oh, great questions, Bob. And I know you had asked a previous question about esters that I was trying to find a great way to answer, because it was rum related, and as I've told you guys before, I'm not much of a rum guy. But typically, let's look back at your questions here. So are there undesirable esters? I'm sure that there probably are. None of them come to mind as being common in distillation. More often than not, it's going to be more along the lines of esters that aren't fully formed during the maturation process, meaning that during maturation, they've not had enough time yet to completely form and completely break down into an ester form that you want to have. That's the flavor of some of these younger whiskeys that are out on the market for sure. And that's sometimes going to be a positive thing depending on what you're looking for. But in general, like with bourbon, you know, that young taste of a bourbon, quote unquote, young, and that's subjective as well as far as whiskey goes. That's often because the esters haven't finished it hasn't finished its esterification process. It hasn't done everything it can to break down because of oxygenation, and therefore the chemical components have not changed over time. As far as, do esters come through in all phases of distillation? So this kind of goes into the question you were asking about refluxing a rum. So refluxing with the heads in, so compressing your heads and then pulling the heads off, but refluxing for a long period of time, like over an hour or more. That's a, and I know the viewers are going, what the hell is he talking about now? Bob had a question about refluxing a rum for a long period of time, like an hour or so, in order to up the ester content from breaking them down via the amount of heat that's added in that hour period, which is a good idea in theory. But you want to pull your heads off first before you ever start refluxing in that. And the reason I say that is because this answers part of your next question as well. So if you're going to sit there and reflux that thing for an hour in order to build esters, which is not a bad idea, pull the heads off, because if you don't, the thing about esters is they distill the second that they are formed. So if you're sitting there refluxing with the heads in trying to get those esters, the minute you turn that reflux off or turn it back in order to get the still to come over, what's going to happen is all those esters are going to come over and they're going to be trapped in your heads, and you're going to lose them to your heads cut. Oftentimes with that style of distillation with rum as well, they will use an acid catalyst of some sort, carboxylic acid of some sort, in order to really force that esterification as a catalyst. Oftentimes in Jamaica, for example, they were using sulfuric acid. I don't recommend that, but citric acid would work just as well as anything else out there, or maybe malic acid, in order to force that esterification. So third question, are significant esters lost by not distilling very soon after fermentation is completed? You know, that's a very good question, Bob, and I don't really know the answer. I would suspect that under, you know, an airlock situation where once the fermentation is done, there's no more CO2 blowing off, there should be no reason why you should be losing any of that esterification, any of that volatility that might come off of that spirit. If you were doing an open ferment, I think it'd be much more likely for sure that you would start losing some of those things, but I really don't have a great answer for that, unfortunately, and I wish I did. But I hope I helped you out with the other questions you had anyways, man. And thank you guys, as always, for supporting the channel and supporting the alchemistcabinet.com, buying the 2 Alchemist Cabinet books and all that stuff. I am working on the 3rd one now. It's going to be a little longer winded. There'll be more recipes and stuff, but it's going to dive a little more into my spirituality. And for those of you that are into that kind of stuff, or that you might be into the If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast, I did just recently guest I was just recently a guest on the Uncomfortable podcast. Great paranormal, 14 and high strangeness podcast out there where I get into a lot of the spirituality around distilling and that sort of stuff, and you should maybe check that out if you like that stuff. And If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything is coming back very, very soon, hopefully by the very end of May. Also, if you haven't checked them out yet, be sure that you go to Spotify and you look up the One Piece at a Time Sacred and Profane podcast. So there's 2 episodes of it out there right now, 20 minutes apiece roughly, dealing with natural fermentation and distillation as it existed in southern Indiana in the early 1800s. That will in time become a kind of like a Patreon thing where you guys can pay to actually listen to that. And I hate to put anything behind a paywall. It's not my thing, but you know, you only put so much time and effort into these sort of things before you sort of have to look at it and go, got to get paid for something somewhere here. And I think that, you know, there's plenty of you guys out there that are subscribers that will enjoy that podcast and will probably pay to listen to it. And, you know, for those of you who don't, that's okay, because as we go through the seasons and we get those episodes get older, we'll start releasing those older episodes for free as well, so you can enjoy them too. So as always, guys, check me out, thealchemistcabinet.com. Shoot me your questions and email bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, and or social media, and or in YouTube comments below. I appreciate it. Y'all have a great one.